George Harrison smiled for the cameras. But behind the scenes, one person made his life a living hell. For years, this Beatles bandmate controlled every note. George played, mocked his spiritual beliefs, and treated him like a servant. In 1969, George finally snapped and walked out of the studio. But that wasn't the worst part. What this person did during George's darkest moments crossed every line of friendship. The betrayal was so deep that George carried the anger until his final breath. Today, we're revealing the shocking truth about the Beatle George Harrison truly hated more than anyone. George Harrison was born on February 25, 1943 in a tiny house at 12 Arnold Grove, Liverpool. The night he was born, the city was under its 78th straight night of bombing. His father, Harold, earned just $3 a week as a bus conductor, working 14-hour shifts and walking miles to save on bus fare. George shared a bed with his brothers until he was 16. His mother, Louise, worked nights cleaning offices, earning only a couple of shillings per building. Their food budget for the whole week was just 15 shillings. Yet somehow Louise made their little home warm and full of hope. In 1955, when George was 12, he was cycling past a house when he heard Elvis Presley's Heartbreak Hotel playing. Through an open window, he stopped, frozen, and listened to the entire song. That moment changed everything. Elvis's sound, especially the echo on the guitar, lit a fire in George. He rushed home and told his mother he needed a guitar more than food. From then on, music took over his life. At 14, George finally got his first guitar. He walked all the way to Frank Hess's music shop to get a cheap Eggman flat top for 3.10. It was painful to play, and his fingers bled for weeks, but he practiced 6 to 8 hours a day. He learned Rock Island Line first and soon stopped caring about school altogether. He failed almost every subject except art. His teacher even wrote that George cared more about guitars than geometry. That same year, George met Paul McCartney. They were on the number 86 bus to Liverpool when Paul noticed George's guitar. George told him he could play 20 Flight Rock, which was no easy task. Paul was impressed. Soon after, George auditioned for Paul's band, the Quarrymen. He played Ronnie perfectly, even though he was just 14 years and 364 days old. John Lennon didn't want to add someone so young, but George's talent couldn't be denied. He became the youngest member of what would become the most famous band in history. The Harisson family supported George in ways that most people wouldn't believe. Louise picked up a third job cleaning the Cavern Club to help pay for his music needs. Harold let George ride the bus for free, even though he could have lost his job for it. When George needed a better guitar, they sold their piano. When the band had their first paid gig, Louise even pawned her wedding ring so they could rent an amplifier. Every penny went toward George's dream. One key moment came when Paul McCartney froze during a performance and couldn't play his solo. The band realized they needed a proper lead guitarist. Paul pushed hard for George, but Lennon wasn't sure. George was still a kid. Eventually, Paul wore him down. They arranged a second audition on a double-decker bus outside Wilson Hall. George played raunchy again, and Lennon finally agreed. Later research showed George had actually joined by December 7, 1957, even earlier than most people thought. From the beginning, Lennon treated George more like a little brother than an equal. The 3-year age gap was a big deal back then. George's ideas were often ignored, and he felt like he wasn't being taken seriously. Over time, that tension only grew. During the Let It Be sessions in 1969, George exploded. He told Lennon he wasn't happy and left the band for a while. Lennon even talked about bringing in Eric Clapton as a replacement. George later said he felt pushed out, especially after Yoko Ono entered Lennon's life. When George joined the Quarrymen, the band was already falling apart. Most of the original members left. Soon after, they kept changing names. Johnny and the Moondogs, Japage 3, Long John and the Silver Beatles before finally landing on the Beatles in 1960. George's arrival also marked a shift in their sound. They went from skiffle to Real rock and roll. He and Paul added pickups to their guitars and bought an Elpico amp, giving the group their first electric edge. George's technical skills helped shape the early Beatles sound. Then came Hamburg, a brutal test of survival. In 1960, they were booked at the Kaiser Keller. They played 8 hours a day, stretching songs for as long as possible just to fill time. The club owner demanded they perform like wild animals. George was just 17. Their living space was behind the stage, filthy and shared with other bands. They barely slept. The club bouncer was a former boxer who had killed someone in a street fight. It was rough, but it made them professionals. George played at the Star Club in 1962, performing every night in front of huge crowds, learning what it meant to survive in music. On February 9, 1964, something unforgettable happened on American television. 73 million people tuned in to watch the Beatles perform on The Ed Sullivan Show. That was over 60% of every TV turned on in the country that night. CBS had received 50,000 ticket requests, even though the studio only had 728 seats. Back in 1957, Elvis Presley's debut only brought in 7,000 requests. That night, Ed Sullivan hit his highest ratings in 7 years with a 45.3 rating and a 60 share. Even Richard Nixon's daughters, Julie and Tricia, were in the audience. The Beatles played 5 songs, All My Loving, Till There Was You, She Loves You. I saw her standing there, and I want to hold your hand. As they sang, each of their names appeared on the screen. When John Lennon came up, the text read, "Sorry girls, he's married." That moment didn't just entertain. It set off Beatlemania across America and launched what would be known as the British invasion. It changed pop culture forever. A few months before that big moment, George Harrison had already taken his first step toward songwriting. It was August 1963. He was stuck in bed with an illness at the Palace Court Hotel in Bournemouth. A doctor told him to rest and gave him tonic. Bored and with nothing to do, Harrison picked up a tape recorder and began messing around. He later said it was just to see if he could write a song at all. That effort became Don't Bother Me. In one surviving recording, he's heard working on the bridge and whistling the melody because the words weren't ready yet. A journalist from Liverpool, Bill Harry, said he'd pushed Harrison to write something. Harrison had snapped back, "Don't bother me," and that line became the song title. Years later, Harrison said the song wasn't very good and might not even count as a real song, but it proved something important. It showed him he could write, and he just needed to keep trying. The track appeared on With the Beatles later that year and marked the first time George contributed a song to a Beatles album. But even after that, Harrison hit a wall, while John Lennon and Paul McCartney were writing almost every song on each album. George was often limited to just 2 songs per record. From 1965 on, this rule stayed in place. It created tension that built up for years. In 2022, Paul admitted there had been an unspoken rule. He and John had made an early agreement that they would be the ones writing songs.